get started. I'll go ahead and call the Village of Essex Junction Board of Trustees for Tuesday, February 15th to order.
And I will call the Essex Town Select Board to order for Tuesday, February 15th, 2022.
Thank you, Andy. I believe we have a couple of agenda additions for tonight. Raj, do you want to mention those?
I've got one. Wanted to add the latest version of the MOU we've been working on, so that we can have that as reference should we finish any of the Tier 2 shared agreements tonight. We can reference back to that and see where we are. So adding that to item D. Myself or Brad can email that around to the boards.
Well, I'm a little concerned adding something that nobody has seen except you guys.
No, this is the final, this is the version that we all last worked on. It's nothing new. And it's there so that we can refer back to it should we need to look at the last list of that first section where it delineates what we're working on.
It's that overarching MOU between our.
Okay, so it's not a new version.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry, Raj, when you used the word version, I thought you meant there wasn't yet a new update. Okay.
No, I apologize. No, I think this one is dated 12/14/21. And it's the last version that we've all worked on together.
Yeah. And Raj, were you all set?
Yes.
And we also, I would like to add to the agenda a resolution in appreciation of Evan Teich. And I would like to add that to I'd like to make that item 5C. So then all subsequent items would be shifted down. Any other additions or changes?
Tracy, did you have something you wanted to change?
Yeah, I just, I get a little uncomfortable when we have something on the agenda added. There is a documentation to go to it, but the public hasn't had a chance to see it or weigh in on it. However, since this is just a resolution, it's not setting policy, I'm more okay with adding it, I guess I'll say.
I think I saw.
I thought Tracy, you also wanted to. Did you want to have more discussion about the tree farm item as well?
Sorry, I thought you were asking me about that specific item.
Oh, sorry. No, I meant
previously.
I meant agenda changes.
Yes, I would like to pull tree farm from consent, please.
Do you have a recommendation for where in the agenda you'd like to put it?
I think we squeezed in the resolution 5C, so I would recommend making that 5D and then shifting the other two items down.
Okay. Could we move that to the end, just in the sense of, personally, I'd like to get these agreements discussed. So if we're going to pull that, I'd prefer that be the final item.
The reason behind it is just to let the public know that there is, we're actually getting into the item now, but just to let the public know that there is a committee that is going to be working on it. It's not my intent to make any substantive changes to what's in the agenda.
I suppose if it's just to bring it up, then sure, we can put that as what would then be 5D, I think you said.
All right, anything else from select board members?
Raj, I see your hands up. You're muted.
That is operator error.
Gotcha. Anything else, trustees or staff?
Nothing from staff.
So that was a couple of things to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So items A and B as listed are not being changed. New item C is a resolution. New item D is the consent item of the tree farm. Then E being the update on separation, F being the agreements, and G being boards and commissions. Capture all that right?
Yep, that's why I've got it.
Great. Trustees, I would entertain a motion to amend the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Amber. Any further discussion, trustees? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you.
All right, select board.
I've wanted to do this for so long. I will make the same motion on behalf of the select board.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Sue. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you all. And that brings us into public to be heard. So this is a portion of tonight's meeting where if anybody has anything you would like to bring up to both boards, now is the time to do so. Please make sure to raise your hand and make sure you have time on the floor. I would request that you please be civil, address your comments to either myself as the president for the Board of Trustees or to Select Board Chair Andy Watts. Please refrain from disparaging comments. Please maintain appropriate language. And again, the time is now to raise your hand.
I have a question.
Sure. If you can just please identify yourself just for the record.
Okay, my name is Betsy Dunn, and I am a BCA member, and I am concerned about the ballots that we've sent out. There have been multiple people who have called in. My husband ourselves got a ballot for someone else that was inside of the envelope addressed to him. And the person that we had on that inner ballot that he had to sign I gave them a call. They had another person's ballot. That person had Tom's ballot. And then today I got a call from one of my neighbors who also had this happen. I'm very concerned about this because if people sign that slip and the names don't match, their vote is not going to count. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. I am assuming our staff have heard that and will take the appropriate steps to see that forward. I will also say thank you for reminding me that people may be calling in. So as I'm looking through to see if there are any other callers.
I can't get into the Zoom. It won't let me get in at all. I've tried on 3 different machines. Thank you.
I think if you go to the website, I believe it has been updated. My understanding is that there was an incorrect link that was posted earlier, and that was updated within, I believe, the town's website.
I just tried to sign in, but I'll do it again.
I see Ken Fignerello's hand up.
Thank you. I guess I'm going to piggyback a little bit on Betsy's call. So I have reports of 4 individuals who have received ballots, and the ballot envelope has somebody else's name pre-printed on it. So I'm just interested to know, what is the process for checking the signature versus the name on the ballot, which apparently is pre-printed this round? And what happens if the signature is not legible? I mean, a whole series of questions come to mind about those ballots where you can't verify that the signature matches the name. What happens if the person doesn't even notice? Which I guess is to be the case, because
that can happen.
I did check with the town clerk today, and she had only gotten 1 report as of about 4 o'clock. And I know of at least 4 instances. So I know that people aren't going to be calling in and they may not even notice. So my question is, what is the procedure for making sure that the signature on the ballot envelope matches the name on the ballot envelope?
Thank you for the question. Our staff have heard the concern. I don't have that answer. I don't know if Evan does or any of our other staff.
Evan's hand is up.
Evan, is this addressing that or was it something else?
Yeah, I'll be happy to address that. I talked to Susan this morning. We asked people that if of the 15,000 ballots that we mailed out, if there are a handful that got put in the wrong envelopes, people call the clerk's office, let them know that there was a mistake and what to do. When ballots do come in, they do get looked at. And there's also information on the website as to what to do. But we generally prefer people call the clerk, who is the election official of the town and the village. Thanks.
That was not an answer to my question. My question was, what?
I understood what your question was, Mr. Signorello. That's the answer, and they can call the clerk. I don't know what the exact procedure is. I'm not the clerk, and she's
Thank you very
not
much.
in this meeting.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
So is there also,
you,
I
Evan.
thought there was also the opportunity to cure incorrect ballots at this point as well. Or is that not true for local elections? I don't know. I guess we'll have to ask the clerk what the process is. We don't know.
If the names don't match, then it would get thrown out.
Thank you for that. I'd appreciate getting the answers from this isn't to discredit anything being said. I would appreciate our answers coming from our clerk, who is the head of these elections. So I appreciate that. And let's move on from that question and going to Mary Post.
Hi, I just want to say that you had said at the beginning of this that we should not make disparaging comments. And I really get frustrated by the way sometimes the callers are treated. And I wish that you would talk to Evan and tell him that it's hurtful sometimes the way he answers people, the way he just did to Ken. And he may not be aware of it. And if someone could clue him in that, you know, this was an actual question, and it would be nice if he would be a little nicer back. Thank you.
No offense taken.
Any other hands up? I would also ask that if you are not speaking, please do make sure to mute yourself. It does get very distracting when there are multiple conversations going on at the same time. I see no other new hands up, and so we will come back to the board and go to business item 5A, an equity update from Essex Westford School District. And I believe we have Erin McGuire here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I wanted to start just by appreciating both boards and their support of the equity work in the Essex Westford School District. My purpose here tonight is to give you a brief update and answer any questions that you might have. I continue to be deeply engaged with the Committee on Equity for Essex. And as the school district representative to that group, that is the group within the context of the municipalities doing really great work and thinking forward about how to do more work around equity inside of the municipalities. Grateful to have some new members there. Brad and Wendy have been great conversationalists as it relates to this work. And so just excited about the collaboration between the district and both municipalities. So thanks so much for all of that. And hopefully this update will be helpful to you. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to use. So I'm going to ask if someone could allow me to share the screen. That would be great. And then I would be able to pull that up. I'm not sure who is sort of the owner of the Zoom, if you will.
I'm going to try to make you a co-host.
You can, if you just hover over the share screen and see the little arrow next to it, if you click on that and allow multiple screen sharers, and then let me share, and then you can take that away afterward. And I would just ask that no one else share while I'm sharing, and then you don't have to make me a co-host.
I think I've done both by now. So
Okay, let's see. There we go. Yes, we've got it. Okay. All right, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and move this into slideshow mode so that you can see the slides. And Andrew Brown, I can see you still on screen. Can I get a thumbs up that you can see that? Awesome, good. I can't see everyone on screen, and I will go ahead and move through and look to take questions at the end. I think that probably makes the most sense. I know you have a lot on your agenda. There are a couple of things I'd like to do tonight. The first is just give a brief update about the equity policy and the procedures and where we are procedurally, and then also do a review of our goals, and then talk a little bit about some of the activities and actions that we're taking in the school district that hopefully folks can learn from. So first, related to the policy update and the procedure, just a reminder that the policy development took place across FY21, and we are now in a place where we have passed the policy that happened on June 15th. Many of you are aware of that. Both boards passed a resolution of support of that policy. Again, deep appreciation for your support. And then over this year, we are working to develop procedure. Just for those people who may not be familiar with the difference between policy and procedure in the school district, policy is the directive of the school board. Procedure is the implementation plan of the superintendent related to that policy. So the board has passed their policy, and the Equity Advisory Committee, who's noted here, is in the process of developing a procedure for consideration for the superintendent. And ultimately, it's the responsibility of the superintendent to publish a procedure publicly, as well as provide that to the board for consideration of alignment with the policy itself. So that's work that's still ongoing. Wanted to let you know that an incredible group of community members, students, as well as some teachers have come together in the Equity Advisory Committee that is established by the Equity Policy and EWSD. That group of people, there were selected out of about 40 applicants. There are about 15 people who are there. There were 6 students selected, so that's really exciting to have a large student contingency on that group. Their purpose really is to do a couple of things. First is initially to propose the procedure, and then also to help support in considering how the district monitors its progress, as well as consider curriculum and other topics around equity, to provide a very externalized view and lots of voice as it relates to our equity work. One of the things that's so important about equity work is that you don't sort of become insular in your equity work. It really needs to be varied voices and diverse voices who are providing inputs to an institution or organization related to this work, particularly those people who are most impacted by the work. So that group is meeting monthly, and the design took place, and now we are, I think, on our 4th meeting, and we're in the process of developing ideas for procedure for each of the goals. So the next piece that I wanted to talk about were the goals themselves, so that you just had a reminder of what our areas of focus are. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly just to remind you of the goals of the EWSD equity policy. The first one is really related to curriculum decisions and ensuring that anti-racist and LGBTQIA+ affirming education are central in our work. This is about ensuring that we do not erase any group of people, and we center people in our work as it relates to their presence in our classrooms and in our schools and in our communities. That also includes disability, cultural, ethnic, religious, multilinguistic, and socioeconomic diversity awareness, and really making sure that that is a centerpiece of our decision-making in curriculum pre-K through 12. We're also working to redefine the accountability procedures for students and really trying to center transformation and redressing harm, so resolving harm. We know that straight punitive approaches to harm are ineffective and often create divides. And so really trying to transform our accountability practices to resolve harms that have been levied against one person or another, and trying to figure out how to bring people together through understanding and engagement across differences. We're also working to make sure that we support and protect people in underserved and marginalized positions while in school care, and really centering family engagement that is inclusive, and make sure that we really think about the needs of families and how their culture and experience and intersection with the historic dynamics of a school district that engage families really regularly, and how the district shows up in that. How do we make that a more inclusive experience and consider everyone in the context of the design of that? We also want to make sure to diversify our workforce, our educators, our administration, our staff from marginalized groups, and retain people so that we are more diverse than we presently are. We want to make sure that school environments are reflective of all people, that they're welcoming and protect diverse personal cultural expressions, thinking about food and language, art, music, and clothing. Thinking about how we celebrate and recognize cultural practices, and also make sure that we are thinking carefully about developing anti-racist, culturally agile, proficient, and responsive educators to center visibility and respect for all students in ways that are developmentally sensitive. So that's another area that we're focused on. And ultimately making sure that we're applying a transparent equity process to policies and procedures and practices throughout the district in all decision-making and our monitoring practices. So those are the goals of the equity policy. And what I wanted to do tonight was spend just a little bit of time in each one, sharing some of the activities that the school district is doing to move these goals forward. As I do this, I really want to make sure to say that there is much work to do. This is not work that is finished. This is not a checklist to be done with. This is a journey, and it is ongoing work for the district. And the district has work to take steps towards activities, as well as training, learning, and engagement in conversations that are courageous to try to move these goals forward. So my objective today is to share a little bit with you of that. I did share this with the school board as well at the last meeting. So as we move into equity goal updates, I wanted to let you know that there is a curriculum auditing training that's happening for all teachers across the school district. We are looking to teach teachers how to audit their own curriculum through an equity lens. Often when you think about the word auditing, you think about someone coming in and auditing what you're doing. And we're really looking at deeply training everyone to think about their own curriculum in that way, and provide auditing tools so that they can use tools to do that body of work. We're looking at 9th grade instructional designs for new book groups, and thinking about the books and texts and materials we use in instruction. Our library procedure now is in alignment with the equity policy, and we're having conversations about health curriculum to address the gender binary bias that sometimes shows up there. We were gifted a set of about 50 books from Gadakada, which is the work that Judy Dow does around Indigenous Vermonters in this area, and recognizing the Abenaki and leading in that space. And we took those books and we actually replicated the collection across all of our schools. It's just a small example, but something that really makes sure to re-engage the Indigenous people of Vermont, as well as this land, and re-engage so that the erasure is lessened. We are working on diversifying our library collections, and we're doing that through training for librarians. We're in our 2nd year, implicit bias training. There's been a workshop available to all educators, although this was an optional one and not everyone is taking part, the essential understandings of Indigenous Vermonters, and doing that in collaboration with Shelburne Farms. So that's exciting. Many examples exist around units on identity and justice, celebrations of Black History Month, which we're in now, and leaning into different religions and other topics that help us think about these, the area of diversifying the stories that we tell, the perspectives that we look through, the lenses that we use to teach, and book selection has certainly been a major focus. We are also working on those accountability decisions I talked about, restorative practices, and installing people in our schools to make sure that there are folks who are really available to support restorative practices at our high school and our middle school. We've developed a wellness space at Essex High School. We're engaged with an organization called Up for Learning and doing training for Essex High School teachers around restorative practice. really cool project around youth participatory action research. And so that's about engaging youth in research in the school, identifying areas of interest and doing action research in the school through a student lens. We certainly have been focused on looking at suspension as a response and really trying to reframe that and think about other ways of moving forward with learning and addressing needs. So those are some things that have happened. There's certainly much to do in that area. In order to support and protect people in marginalized spaces, we definitely have seen a substantial increase in the focus on Title IX and making sure sexual harassment is an area of focus and topic and clear reporting practices. We have an entire bias response system that's new at Essex High School, and that's been really exciting. All faculty and staff are receiving training on the equity policy itself, so everyone has an awareness of understanding that this is a critical focus. Making sure that people are visible and heard is an important part of the curriculum audit training. We're leaning into parent and community areas where there is a notice of inequities. So making sure when somebody brings up inequities that they see, that we lean into that as opposed to lean back from it and really do a lot of deep listening. And we've certainly done a great deal of leadership training. We're also working to make sure that these are areas of focus for family engagement too. So I've talked about the bias response and leadership training and policy review. We've been part of a project around multilingual COVID supports and making sure that cultural liaisons are part of our conversations more frequently. And we've also been focused on diversifying the workforce. This is a long-term goal, and we have made some progress. We have a ways to go, but we have used some affinity-oriented mentoring programs, looking at administrative meeting structures to enhance this, leadership training and hiring team training. We have an overarching plan that we're working on to diversify that is has a whole bunch of ideas in it that will help us think about how we benefit people from being an employee in EWSD in ways that enhance interest and as well as retention, and also thinking about how we post, what's the language we use, how are we encouraging people to apply, where are we posting, and thinking more about recruiting measures. We're also working on making sure that our environment is reflective and welcoming and thinking about how we address celebrations in our school district. One of the things that we want to make sure to recognize is that special days and special celebrations are a really critical part of education. And one of the myths about equity work is that it sort of strips that from schools, and actually couldn't be further from the truth. We're really looking to infuse our schools with lots of opportunities for learning, many different types of celebrations, many different types of religions, many different types of cultures and foods and music. And so having visuals and certainly murals and flags are a part of that. What food are we serving and how are we celebrating through food? Discussions related to the performance selections that we make when we create theater or music, and how can that be part of this piece. We do have an inclusion calendar that we've made available for everyone, and we've tried to create a calendar on Google that all teachers can access, and it puts all of the different celebrations or months for that month on the first day and provides resources for people to be able to bring those concepts into their classrooms with an opportunity for learning about different celebrations. So that's something else that we've been doing. There's so much professional development going on that I couldn't possibly make the whole list, but certainly the curriculum training. We've done racial equity training with Paul Gorski. The implicit bias training is ongoing. Those equity policy faculty review sessions. There's plenty of work going on around new learning for students within the context of the Social Justice Union and many other student groups. There are equity clubs, GSAs, gender and sexuality clubs. So, there's a lot going on to build experiences both for faculty, staff, students. We are looking at doing implicit bias training across. So this isn't just teachers, right? It's about everyone, and have been engaged engaged with our operations side of the house as well. It's been a really incredible journey to be collective in our work together. So with that, that was a very brief overview. I didn't want to take too much time and make sure to leave plenty of time for questions, but those are, that's sort of where we are with our equity policy and procedure, a reminder of the goals and some of those activities and new learnings that we're doing across the district to really deeply engage in equity work. I do want to say I was in a conversation the other day, and you can do a lot of activities. You can create celebrations, you can read different books, and those are all things we need to be doing. And the deep and courageous conversations among faculty and staff are some of the most valuable learning opportunities, and really thinking about how we engage student voice in the leadership work around equity has been incredibly powerful, and being listeners. Institutions have a long history of not being accessible, and not creating a sense of belonging for everyone. And we're looking to turn that curve. We have, again, a long way to go. And this is not about perfection. I often say that perfection is the enemy of great. And we are working hard to recognize where we have an impact that isn't so great, and how to make that better. And it doesn't mean that we always get it right the first time. And so, it's a lot of work, and sometimes those conversations are hard, but we're trying to be brave and have them every day, as often as we can. I'm really proud of the leadership team for recognizing how to seed power, how to think about how to listen deeply to students, the role students are playing in the Equity Advisory Committee. It's pretty exciting. So with that, I think I'll stop there and just offer an opportunity to take any questions. And I hope that was helpful and what you were looking for an update from EWSD.
Thank you, Erin. Really appreciate that. And you talk about how perfection can get in the way. While certainly perfection is hard to reach, you've made a lot of progress. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising all of this. Board members, questions? Go ahead, Raj.
Thanks, Aaron. That was very complete. I know you called that brief. That was a lot. Thank you. So what have you and your team found as your biggest challenges as you've worked on this for the past few years? Couple of years.
I think probably, thanks for that question, Raj. It's a great one. Probably the hardest part is getting to a place where we have a collective system of recognizing our impact instead of our intent. It's really hard to understand when you're really trying to do something well and it is harmful in some way, to figure out how to accept that and really lean into change and recognizing impact instead of feeling like, yeah, but we tried so hard and we didn't mean for that to happen. And so I cite that because I think institutions are designed to, everyone is working so hard to be a contributing member to an institution. That's true in your municipality, right? And when for me as a director, I really want to do well. I want to do things in ways that are helpful to people. I want to do things in ways that are beneficial to the organization. And when I do something that's harmful, your immediate human reaction is to sort of be defensive, and it's not an easy task. And it is sort of what we've been socialized to do, is to protect our own selves as it relates to anything we might have done wrong. And so getting the system to really sit collectively in a place where we're able to stop any defensive-ness when someone is feeling like we're doing something wrong and lean in and listen and try to understand the impact from a multitude of different perspectives is probably the hardest part, because you are often as an individual really attached to your intent versus your impact. So I think I would cite that, and that cuts across kind of everyone. And even with all the conversation we have about it, when it comes to that moment, it's hard to do. And so I think that's where I would land on that question.
I appreciate that answer. And I'm glad you mentioned the Committee on Equity for Essex, the collaboration among staff in the municipality. I think that's a great connection. And I think there's a number of different ways the community is coming together from all different angles. And I think that's great work. So thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, Rod.
Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, Andrew. And Aaron, thank you so much for being here. Both a compliment and a question. Compliment first. You guys are doing such amazing work with inclusion, and I can see it day to day. You know, just even as simple as talking with other parents around the state who have fears about sending a non-binary child to school. But with, you know, in our household, like we feel like our kid is supported every single day. And it's, I know that you're in it, but it's really just a huge relief as a parent that, you know, you can send your kids somewhere where they're going to be accepted. So I think you guys have done an amazing job with that. I did have a question that it was a drum I beat for quite some time on the school board as well. But I was wondering, it may not really fall within your purview, but the school lunches where kids have been being fed for the last 2 years now. And I know that part of that program was wrapped up in COVID funding, but I also think that it's a huge, you know, positive step towards equity in our community. Do you know if, or have you heard if that's a program that plans to extend beyond the end of this year or not? Just curious if there's any news about that, and if there is, if there's anything that we could do to support the effort to continue it.
What I would say is that I know that there's conversations happening at the national level, the state level, and the local level. I don't know if anything has landed at this point, and I would recommend maybe a contact with Brian Donahue as the primary leader in that area. I do engage with Scott Fay, who is our Director of Nutritional Services, through an equity lens related to this. And I certainly agree that if we could feed all children without differentiation based on socioeconomic status, I think that that is an incredible benefit. And I think it does come down to funding and design work that I know that Brian and Scott are deeply engaged in. So I wouldn't want to speak for them about where they're finding themselves at this very moment in time, but I do feel confident in saying that the conversation is happening. And I know that it would be amazing if we can keep going.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, Beth.
All right, Don.
I'm curious with the reading program and the library changes, why you chose 9th grade and not earlier.
So that there's definitely a lot of work going on through all of the grades related to book selection. The high school teachers have been really invested at the 9th grade level to try on some pretty substantial shifts, which is why that showed up on that list. The list that I provided you was not complete at all. So it would take me a really long time to describe every stitch of work that's happening. One of the pieces of work that I know is happening all the way through all of the schools is teacher consideration related to the texts and the books that they're choosing, and thinking across those related to representation from an identity perspective, and some real shifts in some of that. So like the librarians at the early elementary levels are doing incredible work at really revising their stacks, as well as in their selection of books and media, and so are teachers in their classrooms. It's just that there was a real consolidated and clear sort of effort and project that I know about that's happening at 9th grade. So I just wanted to highlight that. So it definitely wasn't exclusionary, but was more of an example. So Don, thanks for bringing that up so that I could share that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Tracy, go right ahead.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks for being here. Along the lines of restorative practices, I was curious whether EWSB has a peer mediation program, and if not, have you considered one?
So one of the parts of the restorative practices training that we're doing does have a student component. We're using Up for Learning that does a great deal of co-training between students and teachers. So that is a part of the conversation. I would also just add that, as I listen to people talk about this body of work, and the more engaged we get around the importance of student leadership, the more I'm seeing come forward, not just in the context of restorative practice, but related to all kinds of training and training teachers and students together. Those ideas are definitely coming up. And, we have a long way to go to do that. I do just want to note that, teachers don't have a great deal of time during the year for training period. So, we could, that's one of those kind of institutional restrictions that we have is time. And I know that's true for everyone. And we need to kind of bend the time and figure out how to make this centered. And one of the things that I think will be really beneficial into the future is doing more of that co-training on a number of different, in a number of different points. We don't have a formal peer mentor restorative practice design, but what we do have is a bias response panel at Essex High School that is made up of students and faculty together to take a look at bias incidents that take place and create recommendations forward together on an equal playing field. So students in that space have the same level of voice that the adults do. And it's a really powerful space to hear and listen and watch an issue be addressed in a way that isn't peer-to-peer completely, because there are adults in the space working together. It's more that adult-student partnership piece. But I appreciate the comment and continue to look forward into the future. One of the things that I didn't say during the presentation that feels relevant too is just, and I know I don't really need to tell anyone this, but the pandemic has had a substantial impact both in highlighting inequities and also consuming time and energy of people to manage school in the context of a pandemic. So that's been a part of all of this. I think we've learned a lot through that, but there are days where I wonder what it would be like today without the pandemic. I can kind of see it both ways, but we definitely are trying to leverage every minute that we're able to really enhance some of this work. It does touch everything. So, the school board is meeting tonight. I'm going to go and talk with them as well. And, at the same time, like equity is part of everything, right? I mean, that's that last goal. It's every decision, it's every voice, every moment. So really trying to leverage learning opportunities into the active teaching to try to address that. But thanks for bringing that up. I think peer mentor programs are important. There is a peer helper program at Essex High School that's really great. And it has a long history and is not necessarily tied specifically to this equity work, but is a part of it, right? Where students are trained to engage other students. They do mental health first aid training. They train around cultural agility and ELL needs and work to be peers in the environment, supporting other peers with those kinds of needs. So we do have a peer-to-peer program as well.
Great, Aaron, thank you. I don't see any other hands up. So again, thank you for your time, the update, the presentation. As you mentioned, there is a school board meeting going on right now. So
there is.
In terms of duties and doing the job you're paid for instead of volunteering to help us.
I'm always glad to be here. I'm so grateful for the collaboration. I just want to say how important that is. I know that you all are dealing with a lot, and holding on to relationship. I can't tell you how important it is to me that we're all in relationship together with the district and with the municipalities. It's everything. So thanks for having me. Thanks for staying in relationship with the district on this work, and I'm happy to come back if you need me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aaron. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. And that will transition us to our next agenda item, the update and consider accepting the report and recommendations from Essex Best. Marguerite, are you taking this one?
There we go. No, actually, we have a co-chair here that I am so glad she's actually going to take this one, Jody. And so I'm going to ask Greg if she can have sharing privileges, unless Jody would prefer that we move the slides along for you.
No, that's okay. And he already did his magic.
Oh, of course, Greg is so on it. So yes, please, Jody, go for it. I won't take the stage any longer.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jody Kamen. I'm a resident of Essex Town, lived here about 18 years. And I'll try to do the same pace Erin did. That was a whirlwind full of information, and I'm not sure I'll do her justice, but I will try to go through this as quickly as possible, but also recognizing I'm trying to summarize a little over a year's worth of work in about 15 minutes. So Essex BEST, let me just back up. It stands for Building Equity, Solidarity, and Trust. And just to give you a little bit of background, in 2020, there were municipal leaders invested in a multi-year engagement with Creative Discourse, Tabitha Moore and Sue McCormick. And the purpose was to build a more inclusive, welcoming, and equitable community. Residents were surveyed on issues related to public safety, policing, and social equity. And about 58 people attended the listening sessions, and over 200 people completed online surveys. And, findings based on the data that were collected, I think what's important about this first set of stats is that nearly half to more than half identified the presence of racism in Essex. And that, when individuals were indicating where and when they experienced racism and feeling a lack of safety, that it was not solely in the arena of policing, but it extended to include education, municipal government, and other public spaces. So essentially, a collective definition of what safe environment consists of emerged from the survey responses. And it really included these 6 elements, and I'll read them out. A strong sense of community and belonging, and that public safety is seen as a collective responsibility. That there's equitable access to resources, protection, and quality of life, and that people's basic needs are met. That people are not discriminated against or singled out regardless of identity, position, background, or views. That everyone feels comfortable and safe from physical and emotional harm and can travel freely and without worry to all parts of the community. That there's a low crime rate and adequate and responsive police, fire, and rescue services. And that sidewalks and roads are safe and well maintained, and that there's adequate lighting. So in response to the surveys and in an effort to continue moving towards those 6 elements of safety, the Essex BEST Racial Justice Task Force was formed. It's comprised of 20 plus legislative, municipal, and community members, 6 of whom I saw their names on at the meeting tonight. So they can also speak up as we have questions if they feel comfortable. But, it was really focused around these 2 priorities. So municipal investments in equity and representative leadership and public safety. And so for the first priority, municipal investments in equity and municipal leadership, there were 2 overarching goals with specific recommendations. So the first goal was around drafting a 3-year strategic plan to build administrative, racial, and economic equity. And so these were some of the specific recommendations. So to institutionalize equity, inclusion, and diversity considerations into budgeting and resource allocation decisions, to reserve shared funding dollars for equity or a human development position, to establish the equity position noted above as a cross-functional position able to influence broad-based policy and decision-making, to structure personnel processes to attract, hire, support, and retain board and staff representatives of the community with a greater focus on hiring people from marginalized groups, to ensure community development efforts increase investment in people, equity, and inclusion by creating and participating in events, particularly equity and social justice activities, and to reconfigure the process for the committee that distributes the 1% of human services funding. So the second goal under the equity and municipal leadership was around building relationships with people from underrepresented groups to advise Essex Best to participate in community racial equity efforts and potentially step forward to serve in leadership roles. And so to do that, the recommendations were to develop a network of socially, culturally, and ethnically diverse individuals and groups to engage in these efforts of Essex Best mission, to host and or collaborate on community events as an entry point for BIPOC community members, such as block parties, picnics, street art, Juneteenth, et cetera, which some of those efforts have been going on this year. To work with the Essex Westford School District to invite students to give regular reports and updates to the Selectboard, village trustees, school officials, collaborating organizations, and the community. To leverage connections from our early work in the task force to share news of leadership openings and opportunities, to send job postings, committee openings to networks, including relationships being built via the task force, and to create a communications campaign to increase a sense of belonging and for sharing Essex Best activities and events using both print and social media, and including a distinctive logo. So those were the first two under the municipal leadership. The second priority was around enhancing public safety. And so the overarching goal here was to continue to enhance public safety. And I think what's critical before moving forward is to just highlight how the Essex community defined public safety. So the Essex community defined public safety as a broad-based community promise that people's basic needs, including housing, food, transportation, childcare, et cetera, are being met. So this became the committee's first guiding factor, that the most vulnerable citizens are cared for first and everyone has equal protection, access to resources, and an equitable quality of life. For the second guiding factor, we needed to continue to consider the impact of race in the experiences and perceptions of safety. And so as we review the recommendations that follow, I just want to highlight that in essence, there's really two sets of recommendations as they pertain to public safety. So the first is municipal driven and are specific to public safety needs that fall under the purview of the Essex Police Department. And the second set of recommendations are more broad and relate to the foundation of public safety as defined above. So recommendations that fall under the purview of Essex Police Department to provide greater funding for providers equipped for non-policing situations to remove an unnecessary burden on our police force and reach better outcomes by addressing root problems. So for example, utilizing the community outreach team and seeing how we can expand the use of this team to be able to respond to mental health or other related issues. Creating pathways for communication and input from the community about Essex Police Department to hear from those who are most impacted. To establish a clear and encouraging process for individual officers and the entirety of the Essex Police Department to have shared learnings when they feel weaponized within the community. To establish an annual commitment to budgeting for low lift, high return opportunities for creating a community dedicated to social justice. And so as the community research models for comprehensive and collaborative support, it was drawn to the Eugene, Oregon evidence-based CAHOOTS model, which talks about, for example, a basic needs hotline. And just kind of drilling down a little bit more, further recommendations around the Essex Police Department were to continue community engagement activities and initiatives to build trust, to increase funding for mental health supports within the Essex Police Department. And that is specifically focusing on the fact that the community outreach funding runs through the Essex Police Department. So before we were talking about expanding some of their supports, that would be through this mechanism. To convert one police officer position into a community liaison position, which I think that's already in play, but we really support that. Develop a Citizens Police Academy. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's a community program that's created to build a bond of mutual trust and respect between the police department and the community. There's different models of these used all over the country. For 911 or dispatch to investigate consistent Essex Police Department dispatch response protocols and to provide sufficient training for consistent responses and de-escalating responses. The next one is to analyze and review calls and outcomes to maximize the effectiveness of responses by assuring appropriate resources are cited. And I should just pause and just say here that these recommendations, you can read it in the full report, but they really came from meeting with the different groups and from looking at data and from having series of conversations with members of the community outreach team, members of the Essex Police Department, members of dispatch, et cetera, and looking at where were strengths and where were challenges. And so that's that methodology and who we talk to is in the full report, but I'm focusing primarily on the recommendations in the interest of time. So last couple ones, to pursue grant funding or provide a grant writer to assist with grant writing to fulfill financial needs for programs and staffing. So for example, looking at the Community Justice Center services and how those could be expanded. Provide additional financial support to increase the number of hours that community outreach employees are on call. Continue to increase the role of community outreach in the response to mental health crises. So again, building and drilling down on some of the broader recommendations you saw at the beginning. So, you know, we're asking Essex leadership to commit to supporting the goals of these organizations, and the support, this is with the broader overall needs that are essential to the foundation of public safety. So again, we talked about kind of these two levels of recommendations around public safety. And these are really getting at the foundation of public safety where everybody's needs are met. And so the support to move forward on the recommendations around this particular level could range from creating ongoing relationships with key members of these organizations to better utilizing resources for Essex citizens, such as writing letters of support for grant applications, helping to identify and facilitate connections to pave the way for change, offering available space to meet as needed, and other support as to be determined. And the organizations that we're referring to are ones such as Howard's First Call Crisis Service, Aunt Dot's Food Shelf, the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, who we talked at length with about housing challenges. And so organizations such as that, many of whom serve the broad, not only Essex, but the broader Chittenden County community. And so just to kind of summarize, you know, when we think about accepting this report from our lens on the committee, it's really that you support the goals of the report and you're willing to support the ongoing work of Essex Best and making a commitment to work towards these recommendations, particularly those that involve the municipalities and leadership. So I'm still gonna, that is the, you know, down and dirty summary of a little over a year's work of intensive work by 20 members of our committee. And there is the full report that I believe was provided to folks maybe last week or the week before, I can't remember.
Jody, thank you. This is quite a lot of work, and clearly 1 year worth of effort from 20 plus individuals. There's a lot that has been accomplished in here, so thank you. A great path forward. One quick question, with how often the police department is mentioned, and while I know this isn't a memo, just wondering if you can touch on it briefly. How has the police department and or the police chief been involved in these conversations?
So I served on the public safety, and I feel like Ron and Rob have been at every or nearly every meeting. And I feel like Ron has really fully engaged in the conversations. I also know, you know, you may have noticed we didn't necessarily put in a specific recommendation about training for the police. And part of the reason that didn't go in necessarily in the high level recommendations is that Ron was also really keeping us in the loop about the ongoing work he was doing internally with his staff and his team. And so, you know, my experience is that he was thoroughly engaged and really invested. And I feel confident that the recommendations that we're putting forth are ones that, you know, his voice was represented. Although, Ron, I know you're on the call, so you could also disagree with me, but that's been my experience.
I will agree with that wholeheartedly. Everything you said is exactly what I would have said. So thank you so much for doing such a great job with your presentation and all of your hard work, and also Catherine Brink for contributing to this. I just wanted to say publicly thank you for everything that you guys have done over the last year and a half.
You're welcome.
Great. Trustees, select board members, questions, comments? Okay. Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, I was the trustee representative on this, along with Pat Murray from the select board. And I'm just floored at how much time and effort was put into all of this work from members of the community. I don't remember seeing such a large effort in my time being active with the community. It's really impressive. I appreciate all their findings. My side of it was more from the representation and the government end, and not the public safety end. And I'm sort of excited to see what comes next from that. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone that was in it from the beginning, and have come and gone and come back again. So tremendous amount of work, very much appreciated.
Go ahead, George.
Thanks, Andrew. Jody, just a technical question in your presentation, and I don't want to go back, I can't really find it, but you used the word, the officer feels weaponized within the community. Did I get that right? And I think I know what that means, but I just want to make sure I know what that means. Maybe you could just explain that to me. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I'm glad. And I actually, let's see, there we go. I actually had that because I was anticipating that question.
Okay.
So when someone or something is weaponized, it means that the person or thing is being used as a weapon, obviously that, but when referring to the police, it's often used in the context of citizens calling the police to report fellow citizens engaging in ordinary activities, but the caller's biases inflate the situation as dangerous.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yep. It's a good question.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. One thing I just wanted to comment that I'm very happy to see that some of the goals that you've talked about have already come forward. You mentioned the late liaison officer in the police department, which is in the budget that's going to the voters in 2 weeks. I think that's an amazing step forward, and looking forward to see more to come. So thank you for your work.
So I am not seeing any other hands up. Shall we move to the recommendation? So I believe we have a recommended motion in the packet. Somebody would like to read that to help get this further along.
Trying to find it.
I have it, but are we doing it independently? I mean, individually, or
Each board will do it.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
Feel free, Sue.
All right, I'll do it for the select board then. So make a motion that the select board accept the report, including its recommendations, and support both staff and Essex Best in the continuation of their execution of the report's recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think I heard Don first there. Thank you, Don. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
And would a trustee like to make the motion?
Sure. I'll move that the trustees accept the report, including its recommendations, and support both staff and Essex Best in the continuation of their execution of the report's recommendations.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, George. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you, trustees. Jody, thank you again for being here, for sharing this with us, as well as if you can pass the appreciation on to all of the other members of Essex Best, would be greatly appreciated.
I will do that, and I raise my hand just to be able to say thank you. I feel like it's really nice to have the work that this group has been doing supported and validated, and I will definitely bring that back to our group, which meets literally a month from now. So thank you very much. Good luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you, Jody. Take care.
Thank you.
So next on our agenda, we have a resolution in appreciation of Evan Teich. So this is a last minute agenda addition because this is our last joint meeting with Unified Municipal Manager Evan Teich. And so really wanted to take the opportunity to put all the spotlight on Evan, allow us to talk about Evan as much as we can for this period of time, which he loves to have done. And as we do so, if Brad, I think you have the copy of the resolution as it's currently drafted. So if you would be able to put that up on the screen, would be appreciated.
I think Greg's got it.
Well, let me see if I do. I do.
If you need me to email it to you, Greg, I can do that real quick.
I do have it. I'm just trying to pull it up, Andrew.
Okay.
Really nice, Evan.
Definitely worth waiting for.
I'm sure it'll be wonderful.
And so there we go. Thank you. Now that we have this up here, would someone like to read the resolution as is currently written? And then after we read this, if there are other edits, we could go ahead and provide those.
I'd be happy to read it. Can everyone hear me? Andrew, good?
Yes, go ahead, George.
Whereas Evan Teich was hired in 2017 by the Select Board of Essex Town and the Board of Trustees of Essex Junction, an incorporated village within Essex Town, to fulfill the jointly and recently created role of Unified Manager to exercise administrative and executive leadership over all town and village municipal operations. And whereas during his tenure as Unified Manager, Evan hired and retained many high-performing employees and helped implement many administrative changes that improve the quality and efficiency of municipal services. And whereas Evan's mentorship of town administrative staff helped foster a new generation of executive leadership within the Essex town government. And whereas Evan identified the need for the town and the village municipalities to be a part of the solution for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and dedicated the staffing and financial resources to ensure the success of this effort. And whereas Evan's thoughtful leadership in implementing state and federal health guidelines through 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic provided a high level of safety for town and village staff with no loss of efficiency or diminishment of municipal services. And, whereas Evan authorized and helped organize 2 Out and About in Essex events during the summers of the pandemic, which helped foster a sense of community and boost the local economy. And whereas part of Evan's responsibility, in addition to his extensive management duties, was to assist the 2 boards and their respective electorates through the process of exploring options for changing the statutory relationship between the Essex Town municipal government and the Essex Junction municipal government, including the possible dissolution of one or both municipal charters and the creation of a new chartered community. And whereas the Select Board and Board of Trustees mutually agreed to propose to their electorates a merger of their 2 respective municipal governments. And whereas the electorate of Essex Town chose not to merge the 2 communities, and the electorate of Essex Junction subsequently chose to petition the Vermont legislature to fully separate from Essex Town and become an independent city. And whereas the decisions of the electorates compelled the Essex Select Board and the Essex Junction trustees to dissolve the position of unified manager as per term specified in the municipal manager's contract, thereby ending Evan's employment with Essex Junction and Essex Town. And whereas Evan's continued dedication to the total community, despite the decision to not pursue merger and terminate the unified manager position, and his balanced, positive, and energetic approach to providing service to both boards helped foster a climate of cooperation and cordiality, which helped lay the foundation for lasting positive relations between the two governments. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Essex Select Board and Village of Essex Junction Board of Trustees hereby express our deepest and sincerest appreciation for Evan Teich's excellent service to our municipalities and our fondest wishes for his future endeavors.
Thank you, George. Of course, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Thank you, Evan. I'd say we could do a standing ovation for Evan, but it's kind of awkward to do when we're all on Zoom. Maybe just a sitting.
A sitting ovation.
Not all of us are sitting.
Wait, can't we could do this. We can just, flash our hands off and on, right?
That's true. That's true.
Okay. It's hard to do though.
So, board members, do we have any other suggestions for the resolution? If not, I would certainly entertain the motion to approve the resolution.
I will make the motion to approve. On behalf of the Essex Junction trustees, I'll make the motion to approve the resolution on behalf of Evan Teich.
Second.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Dan. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you.
Hey, Don, I see your hand up.
On behalf of the Essex Select Board, I make the motion that we approve this proclamation with appreciation to Evan Teich.
Second.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm not sure who that
It was
came from.
Tracy.
It was Tracy. Okay. All right. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Tracy. I do want to comment that there is precedence for the select board to introduce resolutions and approve in the same meeting. I guess wanted to, the alternative would be to vote on it in our next meeting, which is a week from tomorrow. But if there's anybody, I just wanted to have the discussion. Anybody not wanting to move forward with voting on this tonight or not? Or everybody okay with it or no? I can't see everybody. I see a thumb up from Sue. I see a thumb up from Don. Patrick, Tracy, okay? Is he nodding? All right. Okay. Just wanted to make sure before we voted. So, all right. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Evan, for absolutely everything. It's been a good couple of years.
Well said, Andy. Thank you. And again, Evan, thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to our next agenda item. Tracy, you had wanted to pull the tree farm agreement from the consent.
Yeah, I was initially going to suggest that we have essentially like a negotiating committee, and I reached out to Marguerite, and basically that's already in the works. Since I don't think many select board know that, and I'm not sure that the public is aware of that. I just wanted to make that comment, Marguerite, if you have anything else, please chime in. But I just wanted to state that publicly for everyone's awareness that, you know, that train is moving behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'll just add here, it's a group of people from both municipalities, including both rec directors. It may shift and change a little bit if we find that we need other people involved, but right now, you know, it is a small handful of us, and we will be bringing it back to both joint boards in March. So to both boards, one joint board, both boards. In March. So it will be, you'll be seeing stuff before it's finished or finalized. This lease extension is just so that we have enough time to do all of that and actually get everyone involved, you know, and be collaborative in that sense. And also involve the tree farm management group along the way as well. So just to clear that up in case there's any questions about that.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Well, I'm glad you brought this up, Tracy, because I did want to, I had a sort of a question for this negotiation. My understanding is that we, as two boards, did not come to an absolute conclusion that we were going to completely take over and there would be no role for the tree farm management group after 4 years. I think my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, is that after all the public testimony we heard, there was going to be some negotiation around the continuation of the tree farm management group in an advisory or some other kind of role. Is that correct? That they would get that, and maybe that isn't what would happen. Maybe they would prefer not to do that, but there's not a specific set outcome with this, or am I getting that wrong?
This agreement is to memorialize what we agreed to at our last joint meeting about extending the agreement as it is.
Okay, and that's all that's happening here. But I thought the idea was that over the 4-year period after we've sorted all the technical parts of the agreement, there's not a set a specific understanding. Is that right or wrong? I'm seeing Marguerite smiling. I'm seeing Brad kind of nodding. Just give me your thoughts, guys. I just wanted to get an understanding what this is about.
Yeah, Brad, I don't know if you have something you want to add. I will just say it is true if you read the motions. It's not, you know, there is no, the clearest part is that there will be a development of a business plan and what that would look like for the next 4 years. But it is true that, you know, it's not laid out in the motion what the details are. And that's partly, I think, what we want to work, you know, out and get to. And maybe it means that there is no continuation after 4 years. Maybe it means something else. But in the motions, there are specifics about having a management plan and having a business development plan. And then, you know, from there, you're right. There's nothing clear after that. So
right, thank you, Marguerite, because I think the intent of the motion was to kind of leave it a little bit open-ended about exactly where it was gonna land.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Sue.
Not a question, just I have the motions that we made and a transition plan as part of that as well. Just to jump in on that.
Thank you, Sue. Raj?
I was going to make a motion that we move forward with this because I didn't anticipate much conversation about it since it was in the consent agenda and we weren't going to talk about it very much. So I'm ready to make a motion to move us along to the next item. I'm just trying to find that. Since it was in the consent agenda, I'm having a hard time. But
well, the recommendation is that
there it is.
These would. Oh, you got it.
Yep. Are we ready for that at this point, Andrew?
Yes, I think so.
All right. I move the trustees approve the extension agreement between the Tree Farm Management Group, the village, and the Village of Essex Junction, as proposed.
I'll second.
Should I include the town in that? I don't feel. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I'll revise that if that's all right, George.
Yep, fine. I'll second.
yeah, I'll just revise that to include in the town of Essex. All right, thanks, George.
And I'll revise my second to include for that revised amendment motion.
Thank you. Yes, I do believe that would be an important component, considering that it is an agreement between the multiple parties, and it's not just us and the tree farm, but us, the town, and the tree farm.
Okay.
So there's a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, passed unanimously. Thank you.
Hey, select board. Sue.
I can make it. I have it in front of me. So make the recommendation that the select board approve the extension agreement between the Tree Farm Management Group, the Village of Essex Junction, and the Town of Essex.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Do I have a second?
I will second the motion.
Thank you, Tracy. Just one clarification. You said recommend. I think you made make a motion.
Oh, I've done that before. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Any further discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0.
Going on to, we're at 5E now. Village City update on charter timeline and the state process. I did not do a memo for this. Sorry. Essentially, where things are at as of now. The separation bill H491 has passed out of House Government Operations Committee. It's currently at House Ways and Means. It's going to be taken up tomorrow. There's a potential vote on that bill. If it's passed out of House Ways and Means, it would then go to the full House for consideration and potential approval. Once it's approved by the House, it goes into the same two committees in the Senate. So Senate Government Operations and Senate Ways and Means. From there, it would then need to go to the full Senate for approval there. If there are no additional changes, then it would go to the governor for signature or veto or just letting it pass. Until that point in time, separation has not been finalized. So still a few more steps, but it is moving along. That is the update. Raj, is your hand up as a question? And I would be remiss if I didn't also just again express my appreciation to Andy for your testimony, being willing and especially at very last minute to rearrange lives and schedules to be able to testify. And Patrick, I know you testified as well. Thank you as well. Any questions? All right. So we would move on to 5F and the separation agreements. As this is coming up, one just piece of note from a logistical standpoint, the trustees are going to want an opportunity to talk in executive session about some of the changes. So the request, and Andy, thank you for, as we communicated before, what would be nice is if select board, if you'd be able to talk us through the changes that you're recommending or that you're proposing, any additional context that you can provide, and then the trustees, we would go into executive session for 30 minutes, have that brief conversation, then come back to the meeting at that point.
All right, so let's see. Greg, can you bring up the latest agreements? Okay, so let's see. I think the highlighted ones are ones that were talked about last time, right? I wasn't at the last meeting where these were discussed.
Pretty much anything that's new, I believe, is what the select board has proposed since the last meeting. Or after the last meeting.
I think some of this was discussed at the last meeting with the trustees, and some of it is new.
Right, so the dates that are in here being 2023, I don't know if that was new this time or was it in there last time?
Andy, could the yellow highlights represent changes that were made after the last joint meeting, and all of the other underlined and different color changes came from the town since that meeting and were not discussed at the joint meeting.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I guess I didn't completely follow it. So the yellow highlighted has already been discussed?
It's not been discussed. It was discussed last time, and then it was changed in the document to reflect that discussion.
Okay, all right. So the date for end of the fiscal year following establishment of the city, or June 30th, 2023. Okay, so this is right. This is saying that the agreement ends at the end of the transition year, or if the city is formed, and also on the same date if it's not formed. I think that's what the intent here is, in that so that it would have to be further discussed. If the city of Essex Junction is not formed, we'd have to have a discussion to extend this agreement after the first year, or during the first year, before the end of the first year. Anybody have any concerns with that? Sue, get your hand up.
Yeah, just the discussion at the last joint meeting was, I think the date in here was 2025. I don't know. It was further out there,
Right.
and so the discussion was to pull it in to 2023. So I think that's why that date is highlighted.
Any concerns from the trustees on that? Okay, the next change is the original version specified a specific number of employees that the town can employ. We didn't want to be bound by this document with regard to how many and who we can hire, so we made it more ambiguous to change it to the other employees. Any concerns with that? Okay, Greg, can you scroll down? Greg, are you there?
If I may, the whereas about the town and village city manager sharing oversight of the clerk. I believe the select board reasoning there was the managers can figure that piece of it out. And it's kind of a weird situation where the current clerk is a village employee, the two assistant clerks are town employees. And just leaving it up to the managers there to figure out how to make that work.
You scroll down to the next change.
You see my computer moving?
I don't see it moving. Is it me?
No,
it's not moving on the screen.
How's that?
Looks good.
Yeah, sorry about that. I thought I was strong. I was.
Okay. Okay. So then, yeah, right. That we added a new whereas specifying shared oversight of the clerk, since each of the municipalities have the ability to appoint a clerk, and both entities have chosen the same clerk. Needs to be shared oversight there, is what we're asking for. Any concerns with that?
Andy, just so you, some of this, if we have a concern, we may talk about in the executive session and then come back.
Okay, you're all right. You don't want discussion now. You just want us to explain our rationale. Okay, gotcha. All right. So this next one's the same thing with the date. It's interesting that it says 1, 2, and then 3 in it, but it's consistent with the date above. And then this makes the specific comment of if the relationship needs to continue beyond the end of FY 23, then a new agreement would need to be put together. In number 2 there, we changed it again to be less specific as the number of employees that the town can employ. Moving down further, at the conclusion of this agreement, both offices shall function independently at the respective city and town offices unless otherwise mutually agreed by the parties. Leaves the window open if a new agreement wants to be put together to continue sharing functional space. Moving down. So this changes the termination to say that it is a date specific, regardless of whether the city is formed or not, unless a new agreement is put together. Since we had to coincide on the same date, and the one on the dispute there just says added some clarity on the U.S. District Court for the state of Vermont.
Can I just ask a clarifying question on that, Andy?
Sure.
If I may. So I'm just curious if there's any more context you could provide as to why in this and some of and in the Recreation Senior Center agreement, there's now a reference to the U.S. District Court. Those weren't in the previous ones.
I don't know.
I believe it was a recommendation from the lawyer, wasn't it?
Probably.
Yeah, they did come through with Bill's changes. I don't know anything beyond that.
Yeah, I don't know. And then
I was just looking at the version with Bill's edits, and he does have that. So that was a lawyer input.
Yeah, it wasn't anything we explicitly discussed or asked for. And then I think that's it for that one. The one thing that's actually missing from that we did talk about is there was some discussion about being more explicit about where fees go. I don't want there to be any misunderstandings or incorrect assumptions about when I assume when a dog license is issued to a city resident that the dog license fee would go to the city. And I know for those, that's just an example. I know for those types of things, dog licenses, marriage licenses, they're small dollar amounts, but I think we do want to make it clear about land record fees. And then there's the question of, and I understand that as of July 1st, if the city is formed, any new city land record for property in the city would be a city land record, but all previously existing land records are town land records. And any fees associated with those records go to the town. Just asking that we put something in here explicit about where fees are going, just to be sure there's no misunderstanding or incorrect assumptions on either side. And I don't know, we don't, maybe it's not our business where your city land records are going to go. if you've got a solution for that, then maybe it doesn't need to be in here. But if you need some transitional situation, I don't know if it should be documented or discussed, or or it could be specified. I'm just throwing out, things out. You could also leave it up to staff to figure out, right? But I just don't want to leave things on the floor that could cause disputes later. So I think that's it for the clerk and treasurer. This one here, we actually had some additional discussion about, there was some additional separate, Greg asked me about this one after, I guess there was some discussion on the trustees side, where it says, with the exception of all separation related costs. That's a pretty ambiguous definition or term or phrase there. And maybe this needs to say something, and the select board hasn't discussed this either, that maybe if a modification should be made to this, that separation costs that aren't already accounted for in relevant municipal budgets. For example, the town is paying for Sarah Macy's consulting services, which will be a large piece of the disentanglement of the two organizations. That's already in our budget. We're not asking you to pay for the things that are already in our budget, but so I don't know. Maybe this may need to bear some additional discussion on the select board side as well.
Hey, do you mind if I?
Greg, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, Brad and I spoke about this morning or earlier today a little bit. And I think you explained the separation cost here very well. And also noted that the town budget includes some money for personnel costs related to the disentanglement of finance. Both municipal budgets include $5,000 towards non-personnel costs. So hopefully that'll clarified or can be clarified or specified in here what's already in the budget or not in the budget. I do think it's worth the town and village discussing what happens if those costs go above budget, or what happens after fiscal year 23, and how to share any costs that are not currently budgeted for or in future fiscal years. But beyond that, like you said, Andy, there's some money in the town budget for these costs, and they're tied to the disentanglement, I suppose is the word, with this finance agreement versus separation. And the reason there being that finance departments are going to be getting separated and pulled apart regardless of what happens with separation. It's kind of more of a decision that's tied to management, organizational structure. Now that merger that hasn't happened, but it's not necessarily a separation piece so much as a management, board direction, organizational piece. And Brad, feel free to chime in if there's anything I missed from our conversation.
Okay, and then this one.
Up.
Okay, all right. Oh, yeah. Okay, I can't see everybody's faces here. This section here where it says term. This the comment here is to have this agreement start at the beginning of the next fiscal year. Again, I wasn't involved in the discussion on this. I don't think there are other select board members. I wasn't involved in the last meeting where potentially this was discussed. I think the intent here is to, because there's also discussions going on about the current fiscal year. And I don't know that that's a separate discussion than this discussion. As to how finance is going to be funded for both municipalities in the current fiscal year. And so we wanted to segregate this from that and put in a July 1 start date. Also added a clause that the agreement doesn't necessarily, it has there's opportunity to modify the agreement as part of the extension, that it doesn't necessarily, all of the terms that are in here remain the same. Shared finance, including. So Greg, was this including without limitation consulting fees? Is this in reference to Sarah? Do we need to potentially?
That's kind of, I think we talked about with it, money being the town budget, and thanks to Courtney, finance director, for clarifying and confirming what money was already in the town budget. I think this is one of those instances where you might want to take a look and say what happens if costs go above budget. I think
so so there's this actually gets a little weird thinking about it now, though, because it's only FY23 that we have money put in there, but this agreement goes until FY25. And so I think we need more thought here.
Add in that stipulation of beyond FY23, we could just call that out.
Yeah. And again, there's the, you scrolled past it quickly again there, Greg. There was a second place where it talks about separation costs borne, and again, this needs to be separation costs that aren't already accounted for in FY23, proposed FY23 budgets, or something on that order. Okay, and I think that's it for the finance agreement. And then for Indian Brook, in that whichever whereas that is with the underline in it, wanted to, or just added in the comment that there are some exceptions with regard to access that are defined later. The select board wanted to put something explicit in here about the space at 2 Lincoln Street, and that the city will continue, agrees to continue to provide that space. Scrolling down. There's a section added in here similar to the police agreement, where there was a 3.5% of direct costs to support the indirect expenses. And then there's a not, a term that's not in the whereas. This is the section that specifies the comments that were made in the added whereas above.
I think you skipped over the change under Indian Brook, number 2. There you go.
I don't see anything. I see a change bar.
Highlighted.
Okay.
This piece.
Yeah, I was wondering where that was. Okay, it's not underlined, so that's why I missed it. Okay, so there's a request here that the city share in the maintenance and operational capital expenses, Indian Brook. As part of the ability to have resident access to that park. funny that it doesn't show up as high or underlined, but I'm just wondering, there's another change bar there. Did we? No.
It's like there's just a space between there. Must have some of the track changes or sub changes must have gotten funky there for a moment.
Yep. Yep. Okay, and then I don't think there's any, is there anything else down below? I don't think so, but oh, termination. So we want a 2-year 2-year termination clause so that there's some sense of continuity, so that each of us have time to prepare. Say if the senior center needs to move, we can find the space and have time to deal with it, so that seniors feel there's a sense of a long-term situation here. We can't, terminate the senior center, for example, on short notice. And I think that's it. Is that it? I don't think there's anything more below, except for maybe the agreement about, or the comment about the courts, which was added in there.
Andy, can I make one other point about the termination, notice of termination? The notice of termination also gives the city a chance if the town senior bus is not going to be available to.
Oh, right. True. Yeah. I just mentioned senior center, but it's also, yes, also true for senior bus as well. So that the city would have time to make other arrangements if necessary, if for some reason the town decides to terminate that service, right? And that's it. Oh, is there another? What's another copy of this? I don't know what that is.
It's just an older copy.
We forgot for some reason. So
did you get a question?
Go ahead.
Oh,
you're muted, Raj.
If that was it, I was just going to try to get us to move to executive session.
Okay.
Before you do that, I just wanted to ask if there were any other clarifying questions from any other board members before we go into executive session. Okay. Not seeing any. I would entertain that motion, Raj.
All right, I think I have the right one here. I move that the trustees make the specific finding that general public knowledge of contracts would place the village at a substantial disadvantage.
Get a second?
I'll second.
George, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, that's unanimous.
Need the second one too, right?
Yeah.
I move the trustees enter an executive session to discuss contracts pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1A to include the interim municipal manager.
I'll second.
George, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Also unanimous. So thank you. So it's almost 8:20. We should be back by 8:50. Apologize for this inconvenience and awkwardness. We'll be back. Great. So we have adjourned the executive session, and trustees will call us back into regular session. I don't know, Andy, if you needed to formalize that in any way for the select board, or if you all just hung around and
we just lurked about.
Gotcha. All right. So thank you for the edits. So we can go through this in the sequential order, starting off with the clerk. So with regards to the timeline, we think it would be cleaner if all of the timelines were just changed to say that the agreements would conclude on 7/1/2023, regardless of whether separation is approved. Because if it's approved, then it would happen in the timeline. If it's not approved, then it would still default to that same date. So that would just make it cleaner in the long run.
So you're saying all of the agreements, including finance?
Only clerk. So only talking about the clerk agreement.
You're talking about clerk. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, I think that's consistent with what we were asking for.
Is there anything specific to the 7/1 versus 6/30? I just curious.
Fully agreement of.
I think that might have been what you intended.
I think that is what I meant.
June 30. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
I did mean June 30. Thank you, Sue.
No trouble.
My apologies. So yes, the intent of just having it say June 30 instead of the whole fiscal year following establishment, blah, blah, blah. As far as the desire about land records from the town and revenue coming from the town, we're not at all in disagreement with that. Would rather it would rather, instead of us dictating which records go where, which fees go where, doing something similar to what we have with the finance agreement of saying the clerk can figure out where it goes.
Okay.
Our desire, frankly, is to, we don't want to give the impression we're telling staff how to do their job.
Right. Yep.
In terms of the federal court references in the clerk agreement, as well as the other two, we have a very strong recommendation from our attorney to not do that. And so that's, for us, that's just a no. We're not okay with that being in there. The other changes we had no concerns over, the oversight, the other changes, yeah, we had no concerns.
So you're saying no to the U.S. District Court clause?
Right. So are those things the select board would be in agreement to, or in agreement with?
I don't know. I think we need to go back and ask our legal counsel about that clause you want us to strike.
I see a couple of hands. I don't know if you want me to call on the select board members.
Oh, sorry. Pat, go ahead.
Remember to unmute myself. Yeah, honestly, and I apologize, I do not recall why Bill wanted those. If he made any mention of it specifically, like I'm clearly not wedded to it, but I want to hear what the reasoning is. But I'd off the top of my head, maybe Don or Sue or Tracy can remember if Bill mentioned the specific reason why that was put in there, but I don't seem to recall it off the top of my head.
Don?
I'm not sure if I answered Patrick's question, but if an issue comes up that can't be decided in civil court, it would automatically go to district court. But that wasn't my question. My question was, why does the village lawyers object to having that in there?
Of raising it to a level that it, to start off at that level when it shouldn't start off at the U.S. District Court. And Amber may be able to better articulate the lawyer speak than what I can.
Oh, so this implies that you have a choice between two routes. Okay.
I wasn't going to actually piggyback off that. I was just going to say that
We've been negotiating these agreements for 7, 8 months. I don't know, it seems like 4 years at this point, and this has never come up in all of the agreements that we've negotiated. And so I think I would push it back and say, not that the question isn't why does our attorney disagree, but why does your attorney feel that after 8 months of negotiations and other agreements that don't have this language, why are we putting this language in at the 11th hour?
Maybe we'll go back and ask. Nobody, I don't think anybody recalls the reason why it was, or even if we discussed it. So, Sue, did you have other comments?
No, I was just going to basically say it came in the edits that we received from Bill, and we did not discuss it with him. Right. So I think we do need to go back and understand,
so
what was behind it.
So excluding that one change or excluding that one reference to the district court piece, is that something that I hear the select board wanting to get feedback from the attorney on? Are the other pieces ones that you all would agree to? And the reason I'm asking is I'd love for us to get as close as we possibly can to approving these, or possibly even having a motion to approve pending a conversation with your attorney.
Well, we have the select board has 2 meetings in March, and we have a joint meeting in March. So there's 3 more meetings to get through these. So I think we're going to we'll go back and talk about that with our legal counsel and get back to you. So I guess the question I have for board members is the question of how to deal with fees. I brought up, well, we discussed it a bit last time. There was no specific language proposed. I think that's the other piece that I'd like to see, just make sure we have clean language on as well. So I don't know how others. Sue, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because that we did discuss it. We didn't have language to review. And I wasn't clear, were the trustees saying that they wouldn't agree to having language in there, or just some slightly different flavor of that language to provide the staff with some responsibility or decision-making capacity?
It's really, so if we call out, say, town land records, then we should likely call out everything and determine where everything goes. And in all honesty, that's the opinion from the trustees is we prefer to have our staff do that work. That's what we have hired them to do. That's what they have done. And in particular with the clerk treasurer and being that treasurer position, we hold that in state law, holds the treasurer position pretty highly as a independent and fiduciary responsibility, and a highly ethical position as well. That's really where that comes from.
So just so I understand, you're saying you would not agree to any language in adding language around that. I think I'm just trying to understand what your position is. I understand the background. I just want to understand what it would be in the document.
So similar to what we have in the finance one, if you can bear with me while I scroll through our packet to get to it.
Yeah, that one talks about 2 finance directors deciding where funds should go. In this case, it's a different situation. We've got a single person who has 2 hats making that decision. And I think that's what you're posing language similar, right, to what's in the. It has a chain of if the finance directors can't agree, then the managers have to agree, and then if the managers don't agree, then the boards agree, or whatever, however it works. But
Raj, you have a better way of articulating it?
I don't know if it's better, but I think there's 2 questions that maybe Andy was asking before, and I think one of them was, where do revenues related to land records that reside with the town prior to the establishment of the city end up? And right? Is that correct?
No,
Andrew?
no, I didn't ask that question at all. All town records
what I have
are
written
town
down.
records forever.
Because I wrote down that you wanted to know, amongst the fees and everything, you wanted to know, should a land records reside in town office, where would fees to access those go before and after? And I would say with the town. And if that's the language you want in the agreement, I don't think we would have any problem with that. I think one of the concerns that I had with not having staff determine after where fees went for dog licensing and marriage licensing is we are going to get into a situation where we're going to have to come up with an exhaustive list. And I don't know, and that kind of minutia, I think, is pretty clear. If a person comes in for a dog license and they live in the town, I think the clerk treasurer's office can determine that for us, that kind of thing. I think that's where we're coming from. So it's not so much that we don't want language in there. It's just, we worry, or I'll speak for myself. I worry that we run the risk of trying to come up with an exhaustive list, and that could get paralytic. And if the town wants language to say that, yes, the land records prior to the establishment of the city reside with the town, and obviously the revenues with it, then I think that's a different thing. And that's also okay. And trustees chime in if I'm not making any sense or if I'm wrong, but I just sounded like there were two questions, so I'm just trying to help.
So we can come back with proposed language.
Great. So yeah, that was it with the clerk. If we're good to go on to the shared financial.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Raj.
Can I ask when we'll get that proposed language? Will we get it in advance, well in advance of our next joint meeting? You have two and a joint meeting. So I'm worried now that since you guys talked about this prior, but yet there was still no language proposed, that we might not even get it for the next joint meeting. So can we clarify and commit to trying to get that language out prior to our joint meeting so that attorneys have time to respond to it?
So we have a town meeting coming up. We have things that we're doing as well. So I cannot commit staff to do things. And I won't, and unless Greg's willing to, or Evan are willing to commit to a specific date, I'm not going to commit them.
I think we can probably get it for the next shared meeting. In this past instance, we had less than a week to turn things around, and we had some people on vacation. So working on it, and this one slipped through the cracks. So I apologize for that, but I'm pretty confident we can get it into the language for the next shared agreement, or next shared meeting. Excuse me.
Go ahead, Brad.
I mean, I think we've heard what the desires are. We're happy to take a first crack at it if that would be helpful, and send it over to Bill for review and get it in the next select board packet if that's helpful.
Greg, do you have a preference there?
I'll work with Bill. The next select board meeting is
it's a week from tomorrow.
So yeah, I'll see if I can work with Bill and get some language in for the packet when it goes out this Friday.
So sorry, Greg, just to clarify, you're going to take the first stab at it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, so moving on to the finance agreement. So it sounded like the conversation that Andy, you and Greg had, there would be some changes in addition to what was put in here. And it sounds like now everybody's faces are blocking the words. It sounds like the references of things like, with the exception of all separation related costs. There was another reference down in, I believe it's section 3. It sounded like those were going away.
So I thought we talked about modifying them such that they were specific, that they reference the explicit things that, well, maybe not the explicit things, but a statement that if something's already included in FY23 budget,
So then
it's
if
a
it's in,
different situation than beyond FY23. So I think that's where we need to figure out the right language to say, since our FY23 budget already includes some expenses associated with separation and disentanglement, and it's awkward. We can't really commit to what we're going to do in FY24. So we have to figure out how to put the language in here that allows freedom of action for future boards. So I don't know. It's a strange thing figuring out who's going to pay for what, 2 and 3 years from now.
well, and I think that, so it sounds like, yes, then the cost beyond fiscal year 23. So yes, we're fine with that concept, that and certainly that language would need to get worked out. But yes, we were fine with that concept.
So just to be clear, you're saying that you're okay with the city paying separation costs beyond FY23? Is that what you said, or no?
Not quite, no. I'm talking about, so there was a conversation, so there's separation, but then there's also undoing the consolidation work that had happened in finance was going to happen regardless. So in that philosophy, we are okay with that philosophy, that it was going to happen regardless. And so we are happy to share in the costs of undoing the consolidation. We're not going to pay for disentangling the consolidation that our boards had previously agreed to. Then there was.
So just to be clear, you want to take out all of these comments about separation costs that are, there's a different section that says that the two directors will decide whose budget will pay for whatever comes into question, or whether it's done proportionally or however. But with regard to setting a budget, we each need to set our budget, assuming through the length of this agreement that we will share all the costs.
We're fine with like what's currently highlighted. If you're seeing that, we are fine with the directors figuring out the costs. We are good with that.
All right, so then the select board needs to have more discussion about backing away from what we've put in here. Or come back with a different proposal.
Okay. With number 1 and the term, given that this is the way that our two municipalities already have our own finance directors, would prefer that it says this agreement shall commence on the date of the execution of this agreement instead of commencing on July 1 of this year.
Then we need to consider whether this has implications to our current year's budget.
That would just be memorializing what's currently happening. That's the intent behind that statement, just so you the context.
Yeah, but I just want to take a clean look at whether or not there's anything unintended in here that applies to the current year. That because we're talking about this in the context of separation agreements. So just which potentially doesn't start until July 1st.
just going back to the earlier statement of just the disentangling of the consolidation, and that during the management conversations and agreeing to undo that, this was a part of not having shared management, not having shared finance.
Yeah, but the select board was pretty explicit in our discussion that we had about this, saying that July 1st was the correct date for this. So we need to revisit that discussion and either put something behind our reasoning or figure out what we want to do.
Then with any modifications deemed necessary in other agreements, that's worded as with any modifications mutually agreed upon.
Modification mutually, instead of deemed necessary, mutually agreed upon. Okay.
That the current language is rather ambiguous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last one is that same reference of the U.S. District Court.
Right.
That is it with this one. Again, in terms of turnarounds, maybe Brad and Greg can work with each other to get the language right and to our respective attorneys to help get that process going.
On some of these points, the select board needs to have a discussion. So yeah, we'll see where we can get.
But just to make sure that you have legal language and contractual language and not just Andrew fumbling through statements.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great. So then with going to Recreation, Indian Brook, Senior Center, Senior Bus, the spirit of this, or the interpretation of this, is vastly different than what was proposed from the trustees to the select board in various ways. And frankly, with the edits that are provided, the trustees would just prefer of a no, just going on these in our separate ways. We'd be happy to go back to our original proposal and would hope that the select board, or would like to see the select board work with us on that proposal or agree to that proposal. But if not, we're happy to go our own way on these items.
So when you said original agreement, you mean the unedited version of this one, or the one that was had been provided or proposed previously? Much earlier.
The unedited version.
So can you clarify as to which specific issues you object to?
Pretty much all of them. If you'd like,
we didn't change the senior center one that much.
So with let's see.
Or the bus.
If we're not, so with the bus one, if we're not sharing things like the senior center, then we would figure out the bus on our own. That was a small enough one where we would just do that. So changes like, so we're being asked to share in a lot of costs, but yet then we're told to not charge in other costs in other ways. We're being told, or we're being proposed, sorry, not told, that sounds more forceful, being asked to pay for indirect costs for the senior center, but yet not the parts on the screen here that's in yellow, to provide the space rent-free, and that the village/city would pay for all the repairs, maintenance, and improvements. Earlier, we had talked
about similar to your having folks reside in our finance department, right? Although that's not explicitly put into that agreement, and
right. So
it's a similar thing.
We had talked earlier
we're not
about,
going to charge you rent for that space. We're not going to make you, pay for. And we can always take this language out.
Yeah.
We also if we I'm just putting out possibilities here. If we back off on the 3.5% indirect cost,
So the
possibility.
possibilities are to undo the changes in the documents. That's what the trustees would agree to.
Can I provide some context to the repairs, maintenance, and improvements for the senior center? That's what's happening now, and this is looking to institute or just memorialize what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the trustees would agree to undoing the changes that were made in the document.
Oh, we can discuss that. Raj.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew. I just pointing out the changes to the Indian Brook portion as well for maintenance, capital, and the like weren't in the original proposal that was put forth as a way to capture all of these mutually beneficial areas and allow time for dust to settle from all of the changes our communities are going through and revisit these things once both boards had a good idea of where the chips fell.
All right, I guess we'll have to have that discussion.
So Andy, since you probably can't see my hand, I hope you don't mind, I'm just gonna speak up.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just throwing this out there as a, proposal, if you will. Given the changes to Rec Indian Brook, there are non-resident fees that can be charged for EJRP. Anyone can patronize Indian Brook by using the day passes. Would this be more amenable to the trustees if we strip out EJRP and Indian Brook, since those are still accessible to non-residents, and just focus on senior center and senior bus? Would that make it more agreeable?
At this point, from the conversation, I'm going to go out on a limb, since we did not discuss that, and say no, that it would not.
And my follow-up to that is, if we strip out the 3.5 indirect costs for the senior center, would that make it more palatable, given that, as Andy pointed out, 81 Main is covering the cost of maintenance, improvements, repairs. Finance will be located there. If this agreement is silent, I assume that the same will be true for to Lincoln, that any repairs, maintenance, improvements to that space would be covered by the village, since it's a village-owned building.
So we would be amenable to having this agreement go back to what was proposed to the select board.
So just to be clear, you're not amenable to pulling out Rec and Indian Brook and just having it senior center. You want it back to the original agreement or nothing?
Yes.
Sue?
Can you just help us? I think I'm sensing that there's that you're not agreeing to what's highlighted in yellow, and I'm trying to understand what the issue is that's causing you to be not agreeable to that.
It is vastly different than the spirit of what we had originally talked about, which is providing these community benefits without getting into indirect capital, all those kinds of things, just equal access to the great programs that our communities provide. That was the intent of what we had originally talked about, with the difference and also time of trying to get these finalized. We would rather go our own way, and that does not preclude us from, say, in 6 months or a year, saying, hey, you know what, maybe that wasn't the right decision. Let's revisit this. Go ahead, George.
Yes, I'm not sure who's in charge of the document. Could you just scroll down? Because I'd also just like to ask a question about the Indian Brook piece, or maybe it's up, I'm sorry, where you talk about
Yeah, it's in section 2 there. It doesn't, it's a weird edit. For some reason, it doesn't show up.
Well, my question is, the city shall share in the maintenance. Why wasn't this highlighted as being new? This is new. This is new to this. This wasn't in the original agreement.
It is. There's some reason the way this was edited, it doesn't show up correctly. So I don't know why it doesn't show up there. It wasn't. There was there's no intent to hide it or anything.
Yeah, we called it out during the review.
We did talk about it during the review, but for some reason, yeah, the edit didn't present itself correctly.
Okay.
Go ahead, Raj.
Having trouble unmuting all night long. Yeah, Sue, I think it was Sue that asked, is it the issue with the 3.5% alone for the, it is also, as I mentioned earlier, it is also that addition of Indian Brook.
No, my question was that highlighted area in yellow, because we talked about removing the 3.5% clause and there was still disagreement. So
I guess the disagreement would still be with just the overall, with that inclusion of Indian Brook for maintenance and capital and all of that. A lot of these pieces that were added are sort of dwarfed by looking at the similar approach to EGRP, for instance. If we took a similar approach to what it would take to provide those services in the spirit with which we're reading this current draft, that figure is huge. And certainly not something the select board would want to do, which is why we left it out in the original, saying that this should just wash, because again, way back a couple months when we had the tree level and the high level conversation and this last tier 2 agreements, the conversation revolved around, these are the last bits in some ways, and they are going to, for the most part, wash out, and we'll take a few years. We'll see how the communities end up after whatever happens in the next few months and revisit either before that 2025 or by the time 2025 comes around. And then we'll have a much better picture of where we all are on especially these items. So yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it.
Sue, is your hand up again, or is it?
It is, just because I'm just, I guess, reacting to the comment about EGRP, and we also are have the same scenario for Essex Parks and Rec. So that, I feel like that was the we didn't alter that at all. We kept it all the same. So I guess I think it was Tracy that proposed if we just made this document about the senior center, and if we moved the 3.5%, and I think we're still hearing that that's not agreeable. So I think we do, as a select board, need to go back and discuss, because we're not really. It doesn't feel like there's negotiation taking place here. So I think we have to really figure out, what's being proposed to us and how we can react to that, or how we can what's right for our community, right? That's really what we need to do.
Thanks, Sue. Pat?
Sorry, had to unmute. So I pulled up the last document version of this that I had, and just looking through it, I guess I'm a little disappointed that there's not going to be any further talk about this. To be frank, I think that pulling and saying we'll revisit in a few years the senior center and the senior bus, which are crucial services to the seniors of our community, is a horrible way to talk about this. To be honest, I think looking at the substantive changes, if it's a matter of making sure that all the seniors in our community have these services and pulling out the 3.5%, I have no problem with that. I'm honestly a little, I did notice the per capita basis for Indian Brook. I don't see that in the previous version of this, so I understand the objection to the change. However, I will also point out that Indian Brook in and of itself is something that I think, certainly speaking for myself as an Essex Junction resident, I want access to it. And I would prefer to keep it at the same access, same fees that we used to pay. And to be frank, I think that it is completely fair that maintenance, operation, and capital expenses of a service that we are asking to have equal access to, it makes sense that an Essex Junction resident, want to, on a per capita basis, if there's extra maintenance costs because we are using it, that we should be part of that. I just want to make sure, I guess, before we continue on and say, okay, let's leave it for 2 years and see where we are, that we're completely aware of exactly what that means for all the seniors or the people who would utilize these services in our community. I really don't see any reason why we, if we talk about this right now, can't just say, let's pull out the 3.5%. And then honestly, I would love to hear the thought process behind, why as a Junction resident getting equal access to Indian Brook, why we shouldn't also be part of the maintenance costs for that. It makes sense in my mind. So if there's a rejection, then I want to hear it.
Sure, and I want to clarify a couple pieces. So one is the very first conversation our boards had around the senior center and the conversations that trustees have had. We have always been committed to the senior center and providing it. The question is whether we're going to share in doing that with the select board or not. So the trustees are 100% committed to having a senior center for our community. Whether we do it with the select board, that's the question being posed upon us. The other thing is the budgets we're about that our communities are going to be voting on are going to take us through June 30, 2023. So what we're talking about is July 1, 2023 forward. We're not talking about pulling seniors or the senior center out tomorrow. We're not talking about shutting a senior center down or preventing senior access in this current year. It's not at all a conversation we're having, nor is that something we're implying. Because again, we are very committed from the village perspective, the trustee perspective, to having the senior center. With regards to the agreement in general and the changes and being opposed to it, Raj had mentioned the indirect costs for EJRP. EJRP's general fund budget is over $800,000 with an enterprise fund of $2.5 million. So that's why we talked about not pulling down the nickel and diming of 3.5% indirect, because frankly, it is a cost that would not at all be something that I feel I can predict the select board would be open to. So that's why we didn't go down that path. And that's why early on we talked about not going down that path. And so the other portion that I mentioned is time. We want separation to be finalized this legislative session. We want these agreements to be finalized as soon as possible. And so frankly, it's easier to just say for now, let's not agree to it, or it's easier to say we would agree to the changes that we had for the proposal that we made to the select board. We would agree to that, or we would agree to not sharing these services, possibly picking the conversation back up in the new fiscal year. But we are not talking about necessarily waiting 2, 3, 4 years or anything like that. So I just want to make sure the intent here is very clear. George, I think your hand was up first.
Okay, thanks. I agree generally with what you just said, Andrew. And in response to Pat, I would love to see the senior center continue as it is, status quo, in the sense that we're both sharing in it. That's been my hope all along. But let's just by a sort of analogy, if we agree to that, and let's say, God forbid, Lincoln Hall burns down. So would the town be on board with sharing 50% of the cost of rebuilding Lincoln Hall, because that's where the senior center is located, and we have this agreement that with the town, and that's sort of how I would look at the issue with Indian Brook. There's a lot of issues with Indian Brook, a lot of capital expenses that could be coming down the road, and you're saying the village would be on the hook 50-50 or on a per capita basis to meet those capital costs. We've got nothing, we're not binding you to the town to any such agreement for the Essex Junction side. So I just have a real problem with us being bound to that kind of an agreement for the town side.
Roger, hand was up. Did you take that down?
I did. You both covered it. Thanks.
So we're losing all three of these because they're in the same agreement. If they were in separate agreements, would we be having a different discussion?
This that sounds like what Tracy was asking before.
Yeah. Right.
No.
All right. So I guess we'll have to have a discussion, and we'll let you know when we. So. Right. Where's that going to go? Okay. Anything else?
Nothing else from us.
Oh, there's more agenda, Andrew.
Just pulling that part up now. Thank you. So we are now on to the discussing of shared boards and commissions. So I know Brad had sent around, or there was a document that was sent around that talked about where we had last left this conversation. Within our MOU, just looking to see if we included this within our overarching MOU. But where we had left this conversation, as I last recall, we had talked about which boards we wanted to share or not to share. I think at our last meeting, we talked about the conversation that Andy, Patrick, Raj, and I had at the Housing Commission. There was the email from the Energy Commission. Sorry, trying to find the details for this agenda item.
If there's a way that I could share my screen, looks like I can. I can just bring this up, Andrew.
Helpful, thank you.
Nope. Are you seeing this select board memo, or are you seeing?
Yes. Shared board
Yes, it's just a little small.
Great. Sorry, my computer is not cooperating very well with me at the moment. Basically, Andrew, there are four kind of groups: the Essex Best, the Committee on Equity for Essex, which is a staff initiated group, Economic Development Commission, and the Housing Commission. And both boards have had some discussions about economic development. I think we're waiting to hear back from the Housing Commission on a firm recommendation. So it's really about, it's down to kind of these groups and whether or not the two boards see value in continuing a relationship with any of these. Sorry, the Energy Committee is also in there, and the chair from that committee expressed interest in continuing. I will see if I can get a better version on my screen.
So I'll just go ahead and start off with Essex Best, with what was presented to us. This seems like something that, yes, we should continue. I don't know for how long, if we want to set a time frame. This multi-year plan that they provided seems to be a very beneficial document that we've just accepted. I would love to help see it forward and continue. Go ahead, Raj.
I would agree with that, considering how integral the police department leadership has been in that whole process. I think having it continue until it's ended, with the idea that it continue while we have a police agreement in place, is valuable. There's more aspects to it, but certainly that is one of them, and so I would be all for seeing that continue and until the boards decide otherwise. I don't know that we need an end date on that.
Go ahead, Andy.
So I'm scratching my head as to whether this is I mean, we had discussions in the police contract, discussions about a board. Is this that board, or is this a different board? I also have questions about some of the things that are in their recommendations are town only things, like the 1%. I have not heard or seen any indication that the new city is going to do a 1% for human services like the town does. I have some potential trepidation about having that be a joint thing if you're not contributing. There's I guess I have to go through and think through a lot of the specifics in there. I know, yes, the folks are doing absolutely wonderful work, and yeah, we should make it continue, but we need to make sure we're doing it equitably. I don't know what else to say.
Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, Andy, I think you bring up some good points and points that kind of go along with a lot of these other commissions. So, for instance, I know that in the town budget, proposed town budget, there's $30,000 for some of this work, maybe 20 to 30 something in there. That's covering the next fiscal year when we're still sort of consolidated. But I would fully expect that if the village were going to participate and continue in this, that they would also find a budget allocation to put forward to continue that work. And that, with a lot of these things, since we're not one joint community anymore, that we would have to look through all of these committees or ask staff to recommend ways that the committees would be appointed, financial decisions made, budgets set and funded. I just wonder, I guess for me, the overarching question to all of this is, well, two questions. Which ones are we interested in pursuing? And right now, do we need, because we still have some time, or I guess three questions, sorry, bear with me. Which ones are we interested in talking about? How do we want to approach them? Do we want to simply state our intent and formalize our intent as two boards and ask staff over the next year to look at how that could work from an appointment, budgetary, decision-making standpoint? For instance, for the Housing Commission, I see no reason why they couldn't work together for both our communities, but there will be times when a certain topic or a certain grant or a certain effort might relate only to one municipality, and they can still work on that together. But when it comes to returning to that particular board for approval, funding, budgetary participation, that it would be would be a process for that so that non-residents wouldn't be making those financial decisions and whatnot. So I think that's totally possible. I don't know. I guess the only other question I have for all of us is, do we really need to get into that minutia, or should we just be declaring intent and asking for that work to continue over the next fiscal year as things decouple? I mean, we can participate in that process, but do we need to hammer out every single one of those questions now? And I don't necessarily have an answer, but trying to simplify the conversation a little bit and not, again, get into the minutia of making these decisions, which should take, frankly, with some of them, some thought. So.
All right, George.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just sort of concur with what Roger just said. I guess my question is, this is a whole different context. We're not proposing to sign contracts to continue appointed commissions. Commissions come and go. They're creatures of elected boards, and so this is a different thing than the police agreement and the IT agreement and all the other agreements we've had. So I'm not really sure what the intention is here. Are we trying to bring this all to a conclusion? It seems to me that this is something that we could kind of see how things play out over the next year without having to make a decision or any kind of a firm commitment tonight. Generally, I feel that most of us think these commissions are doing good work, and we would want to see that work continue. I have raised a concern just with the trustees that we are not taking full advantage of some of the state funds that are available to us by not having our own downtown committee. And I would see a downtown committee as having a lot of overlap with what the Economic Development Commission does, but it would just simply be a completely village or Essex Junction focused committee. So that would be something that I think I would want to see. I would propose taking a really serious hard look at that. But right now, I'm not out to, or I don't think any of us are out to shut down any of these committees or dissolve them. I think they're all doing good work.
Thank you, George. For a little bit of context, or to help with this agenda item in general, in the overarching MOU that we've previously agreed to, we have that shared boards, commissions, and committees would be a part of these tier 2 agreements. And so with the select board saying that separation agreements are an all or nothing package, the intention, I would say, then is for us to figure out which boards, committees, commissions we want to explore working with together or not. For those that we do, I would ask, can we agree to have an agreement that would simply be, we agree to iron out the details of sharing these boards, committees, commissions. And so then for tonight, could we just identify what those are?
And Andy, if I can answer one of your questions, Essex Best, the presentation we have tonight, is not what we went back and forth a bit on in the police contract. That was specifically if Essex Best recommended specifically a police oversight commission, which I don't believe they have. So that's a different thing. So it's not. So sorry, I forgot to answer that question of yours.
So Andrew, my brain is still reeling from the fact that you want to walk away from the senior center or back away from the senior center. So I'm struggling with thinking of anything here. So yeah, I guess my, I think the work that was mentioned, I think Raj mentioned it, of figuring out how to make joint committees work may be the thing that we need. And you're right, there's no way to resolve that in the next couple of meetings. And so I don't know. I guess I'm at a loss as to where we go here. Maybe the select board needs to have a discussion about whether to just remove this, defer it, whatever, what we want to do. I see Pat's hand up. Pat, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Andy. I agree that there's clearly not enough time to iron out the details or the specifics for them. But I do also think that if we probably straw polled ourselves, that we would have loose agreement that we would do want to meet together with all of the various committees that were, brought up, those big 4 or 5, energy, housing, etc. Might this be an appropriate thing for a subcommittee? So we don't have all 10 of us, kind of working through each committee. It would just be something we agree, hey, these 4 or 5 committees, and then these are the ones we want to go in on, and we'll have 2 reps from each board, and they'll come back to us with a recommendation in 6 months.
We did ask the boards themselves to come back with recommendations or discussions about it. We did get something from energy, but not too much from others.
Yeah, I think ultimately, since we'd be the ones who would, or some mechanism of how we're appointing new individuals to these boards to make sure that it's fair, make sure that everyone has a space on the boards if they want it. I'm just thinking, again, spitballing off the top of my head, that trying to work this out over time with 10 people is going to be really tough. And I think we've not used them in a while, but this seems like perfect subcommittee work for me. 2 reps from each board.
So
we've also been trying to limit adding new meetings, but yeah. Sorry, somebody else was talking.
Yeah, no, it's okay. 2 quick things. One, Andy, I just want to correct something you mentioned. We're not walking away from the senior center. We are committed to having a senior center. It's just whether we're going to work collaboratively with the select board or do it jointly with the select board. Just want to make sure that narrative doesn't get put out there. So with these boards, commissions, committees, clearly this is a lot of detailed work. So my ask then to go back to the select board, would you be okay just getting rid of shared boards, commissions, and committees from that MOU? And we then take the next period of time, however long it shall be, so we can actually have these conversations? Because otherwise that's going to hold up signing off on all these other agreements.
Hey, how about that?
That would also then give time for these committees, commissions, and boards to come back to us with their recommendations, instead of us telling them how to do it.
So I think we would. I think we need to have that discussion in context with all the other things we need to discuss.
So then I guess the two past requests, if you will, from the trustees, or from my perspective, trustees disagree if you disagree. Either our 2 boards agree to only at this point in time, for the MOU's sake, identify the boards that we want to figure these details out, and that would satisfy the MOU, or we remove that section from the MOU. So when you select board talk about that next, if those could be the 2 options, that'd be greatly appreciated.
So sorry, can you clarify what the 2 options are in your view?
In the MOU, number 2, Exhibit I is and shared boards, commissions, and committees. Either striking that from the MOU, or agreeing that to satisfy that MOU, all we would do is identify the committee boards and commissions that we would want to have an agreement with.
Okay.
Yes, even just this last 10 minutes, clearly it's going to take some time to hammer out these details for any one of these boards, let alone multiple.
All right, we'll have a discussion. Anything else?
I just had a question on it, if it's okay, I ask a question.
Go ahead, Sue.
In the memo there was a discussion about possible action with the town of Essex that took place at a trustee meeting on the in reference to Mr. Tyler brought up Miss Haney's letter from the reading file to illustrate the need for the village to focus on their own economic development vision. So I was trying to understand, I know, George, you already referenced about the downtown committee, but
Right.
in reading through this, it kind of, I wasn't sure if there was also thought of a separate economic development committee, because that's how it kind of reads.
Right, if I can answer, Sue, you're right. That, as I said, when I look at a downtown committee, economic development for Essex Junction is our downtown is our economic development zone. And if you have a housing commission that's looking at redeveloping and infill development and handling all the capital projects we have coming down the road, that's economic development, and that wouldn't be the responsibility of a joint village town economic development committee. That would have to be just an Essex Junction only focused downtown commission. And so I'm just saying there's a lot of overlap between what that what that downtown commission would be doing and what the more general shared economic development commission does. But would see that almost in certain instances be working at cross purposes or doing the same thing, I guess. So that's why I'm saying I'm not really sure down the road, but I'm talking probably to get a downtown commission going and get it approved by the state. It's probably going to take the better part of a year. So it's not something that's going to happen right away. And so my point is that the current Economic Development Commission would be fine. I don't see any reason to abolish it or dissolve it right away. But I think we have to be honest and say, signing some contract or making some statutory commitment that we're going to keep this thing going for years to come. That's where I would have a problem. But then I say, well, wait a second, commissions. We could decide 5 months from now, the two boards could decide to dissolve the economic development. They're just creatures of elected boards. So that's why, I don't know, it's a little bit of a confused answer I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand, because it references forming your own economic development commission. I didn't know whether the thought process was in addition or in place of. So
no, in place, the downtown commission would be the economic development commission. They would serve the same purpose.
It says forming a downtown committee or their own economic development commission. So maybe that's.
It might have been something lost in translation there.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Raj?
I mean, in the interest of brevity, I'm ready to make. I know what. I've given this some thought, and we've got 4 here. We heard from Essex Best tonight. I've already said I think it makes sense to continue that work, especially since a lot of it involves our public safety resources, which we have already agreed to share. I think we've heard from Energy Committee that they've actually had the conversation and they want to stay together, and that also makes sense to me. A lot of that energy doesn't stop at borders, and frankly, we should bring in more communities. Economic development, I don't think that should continue. I think we have cross purposes. If they want to collaborate, great. But generally speaking, I think we should probably separate it. And I think the Joint Housing Commission is just getting off its feet and should be given time to continue. And I think, unlike economic development, I think housing and the issues around it are a little bit different. And that commission can do good work as long as we take some time over the next year to give them some parameters about how the logistics will work out about them with decision-making and budgeting. So from an MOU point of view and from a decision-making point of view, I suspect we can make that kind of decision. That said, what George brought up a minute ago, saying that, these things are not just because we agree to do the Economic Development Commission, for instance, in an MOU, doesn't mean we can't turn around in 6 months and decide as a board that we don't want one anymore. Or you. They're not sort of statutory beings that are contractually, created. So sort of two minds. I mean, does it need to be? Does this really need to be part of the overall conversation and the overall decision? That said, I don't know that that's that. I totally hear you, Pat. I'm just not sure. I guess we haven't heard from Joint Housing. I think with the Essex Best report, the implication from their final report is they see that work continuing. So I guess it's fair to say, yes, we haven't heard from Joint Housing. But, my overall question is, how with another year in front of us of untangling consolidation, how critical is this decision to the overall scheme of things?
To quickly answer that question, Raj, from my perspective, this is very low in terms of how important it is to untangling consolidation and separation. So I know there was a request from me to the select board about the ways to move this forward. Raj, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think we need to hear from the select board, and whether that's now or from their own subsequent meeting, I would just request that we resolve this for our next meeting.
We'll have a discussion.
If there's nothing else on this, and I believe that would take us to the consent.
I move that the select board approve the consent agenda. Just jumped right to it.
Second.
Thank you, Tracy. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, select board approves consent agenda 5-0.
And I'll make a motion that the trustees approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? 5-0 as well. And board member comments. Anybody want to say anything we haven't already said? I just want to reiterate my appreciation to Evan. Sorry, George. Just want to reiterate the appreciation for Evan Teich. Again, this is the last joint meeting. Appreciate all you have done to get us to where we are, where we have been. Your leadership has truly been a wonderful addition to our community. Sorry to see that you won't be around, won't be able to see you walking your dog in a few months. You'll be greatly missed.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Thank you, Evan.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Thank you. That's what I was going to say, Andrew. Thank you. Took the words out of my mouth.
Thank you for the kind words.
Anybody else? Hearing nothing, I would entertain a motion to adjourn from the trustees.
Adjourn. Second.
Okay, Dan had the motion, Raj had the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Make
Bye-bye,
a
guys.
motion that the
Thank
Essex
you.
Select Board adjourn for the evening. And thank you, Evan, for your hard work.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
Grateful second.
Just a
Thank you, Pat.
question.
Further discussion? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question whether we wanted to go into executive to talk about our response to the trustees' responses tonight.
I don't think it was Warren, Tracy.
Well, we do have an executive session for the tentative agreements that's on the agenda. That's how the trustees went
Right, the
into their
trustees went and did
executive session
theirs.
earlier.
I don't really want to, but if others do, I guess we could.
I'm not saying I particularly want to. I'm just wondering if it would be a.
Our next meeting is Wednesday next week. It's during the school vacation. Is anybody gone?
I have another question. If
All
I
right,
was
Sue.
hoping to ask. We didn't ask for public input on any of our
Not a
discussions.
single public input question tonight, right? Yeah.
Not to
was
be
odd.
too stickler, but I think we do already have a motion and a second on the table, and motions to adjourn are non-debatable.
Non-debatable.
I can withdraw if you want.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. Good night, folks.
Have a good.